We few, we happy few, we band of brothers.
Well, hello and welcome along to another We Happy Few 506 podcast, or in this case, We Lonesome Few, as it's just me. Dougie isn't here, but I'm going to crack on. This is a midweek podcast recorded on a Wednesday, and I am made the decision right here and now that I think we should keep it nice, tight, concise, and give it to the Patreons because I'm trying to give back to the Patreons. I know I organised that trip to Oldbourne, which has caused absolute chaos, which is entirely my fault, but we'll get that done. Any road up, as they say where I come from. We've got a great guest on today who's got a really quite beautiful smile. Roberto Garcia, how are you? I'm going to do an intro on you. I'm
I'm
distracted.
good, thank you.
Also, what's in the background?
That's one of my that's actually my logo that I created for my company, and I had a great artist in Texas that helped me out with that.
Oh, great. What is your company?
Pretty much I originally started out as a military advisor and then got into stunts. And then I think with just how the nature of the business goes, one of my best friends and longtime business partners, Free Joe Farnsworth, who you guys know,
But
was the one that told me, he's like, hey, don't limit yourself to one thing. If you can do multiple things, do it, because it all pays the same. So I'm like, all right. And I took that on, and I got to learn a lot of things from him. And I'm still good friends with him. And I share another company, Double Dog Limited, with him that just deals with like strictly military. For me, I ended up segueing into this company around because I wanted to get more into production, and I wanted to get into more of the creating part of it. So
okay,
this is
cool.
pretty much on my pillow.
We should delve down into the creative side of it because yeah, there's a lot to talk about there, especially even something. Well, we'll definitely talk about the Pacific. I'm very fascinated by because different people will admit to this in a different way. How much do military advisors lift what's on the page and create the battle scenes themselves? How much the director takes credit for it? How much writers take credit for it? How much actors take credit for it? Because it's got to be the military advisors, really, because the other guys don't know what they're talking about.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess to a certain extent that is 100% true statement. I think with the only small like miniature fraction of that some writers are actually veterans themselves. And
Oh,
the
yeah,
problem that sometimes they face is I usually tell people, I'm like, war can be very chaotic, but 99% of the time is hurry up and wait. So you're
yeah,
just waiting and waiting and waiting. And when everything pops off, it seems like an eternity. And to try to put that on the screen, sometimes it's very boring to people because they just want to see like the guns, the action, the explosion. But I think that's one of the things that on all the three books that they portrayed for the Pacific, and then also for the book that they did for the Vander brothers,
yeah,
they shared a lot of the camaraderie that goes into it before it actually kicks off. And to be able to harness that on screen, it's a very difficult task. And you need a lot of people that are willing to be able to tell the story for that. So that's why I say, like, you're correct. A lot of people think they know what they're talking about. Like, yeah, no, man, like I read the book, like I got it. I know what I'm gonna do, and I know I'm gonna show it. And sometimes, honestly, it's not even that. It's just the mindset that a lot of the actors have to pretty much pull out, even though they didn't have those experiences themselves. They have to harness themselves into that person's shoes that actually lived it. And then for some of the veterans themselves, when they're writing, I've talked to a lot of veterans that have become either writers or have dealt within the entertainment industry, that it's hard for them if they don't have a good base. It's hard for them to jump in and then be able to pull themselves back out because as you know, with actors and performers, you for the real good ones, you have to dive yourself into it with no safety net and to fully embrace that, and then to be able to come out of it. It's difficult for some people, and they dealt with PTSD and things like that, that it's hard to come off, that they have to go back through either therapy or they have to go to their support groups to be able to do that. So it's a very thin line that gets blurred out a lot. So a lot of people don't want to say the real stuff, and none of the people that do, they have to go through a lot of after action report and actions to not get stuck back into the drama of war.
Yeah, a couple of things from what you were saying that spring to mind straight away. Firstly, is the incredible scene in the Pacific, which it captures everything, but the hurry up and wait, but also the horrible situation in one amazing scene. And that's the scene where Rami Malek is throwing the pebbles into the
Oh,
oh, um, like that. My father's a veteran, and my father was in the first Gulf War. He was in the Falklands,
yeah,
and he bangs on about the hurry up and wait a lot as well. And the new movie that's come out, I think it's called Warfare. It's Alex Garland.
yeah,
Yeah, and I watched it. I wasn't that impressed, but my dad was blown away by it. He's like, "That's exactly what it's like. That is
yeah,
a bunch of seriously
yeah,
hanging around, and then it just boots off."
yeah. That writer, I've met him before. He's a really good military advisor as well. Navy SEAL, was part of the advisors on Lone Survivor, and he was also one of the guys that helped out on the movie Valor. So he's an actual teams guy, the one that wrote that one, and I think he collaborated with somebody else. I wish they would have made it here in the U.S., but I think for logistical reasons they filmed it all in the UK. If I was informed correctly.
Yeah, it seems that way. I'm pretty sure every one of the actors is English. I'm like, you can tell by the bad teeth, mate. Not like
No, it's not good. No, but that's I think that's one of the things that like you mentioned earlier before that I think at this moment and how the industry fluctuates back and forth, I usually try to tell people it doesn't really take that much or um to contact either a military advisor or pick somebody's brain as far as the veteran field, but not usually take all the information as like the Ten Commandments type of deal. Because I usually tell people, I'm like, the military is so strange that there's a lot of one-offs. And what I mean one-offs, like one subject or one thing that happened at one particular time, and it will never happen again as far as warfare and history is concerned. And those usually are the guys that get the RP. I've seen a guy get the not actually seen, but I've heard of the story of a guy getting an RPG through the stomach and it didn't detonate. It just got stuck there. So that like that happening, it doesn't happen all the time. It just happened that one time, or the RPG or a grenade going off and it's a dud and it doesn't go off like that. That's not things that happen all the time. That was just one freak occurrence that happened at that one time. And what Hollywood tends to do is like, okay, well, they used it in that one movie or that one show. Well, let's do it again and repeat and repeat. I'm like, oh, like that's not the reality. And that's what most people think that in their mindset when they're like, oh, well, I'm gonna join the military because it's that type of deal there. I want to go get some action. Like some guys went through like a full 20-year deployment and or 20-year service and never saw a day of war. You
yeah,
know, there's other guys that did 12, 8 a contract and never seen war. And there's other guys that just did one contract and all they did was just pretty much be down in the dirt and wherever they got sent to and whatnot. But I think that's one of the things that I try to tell people. I'm like to be able to pick everybody's brain and to find the subject matter, and that's one of the things that I love about Band of Brothers, the camaraderie of that unit.
yeah,
You can pick out any good unit with any branch of the military service, and you have that type of camaraderie with brothers. The same thing with the Marines. You have, yes, we're all brothers. Yes, we're all together, but you get two different units in the same division. They're like, hey, fuck, like you
yeah,
can't do that. Like they like no, like in the fighting starts amongst us, but the fighting is there to propel us to be better.
yeah,
And I think that's one of the things that the Pacific showed. And at the end, when everybody starts coming against us, they're like, all right, now we can all join together and push forward. But a lot of people don't understand that. They think that there's a rivalry against each other to try to tear each other down within the military, or we don't talk to each other. We talk because there's guys that are infantry that talk to from the Marines to the Army and like, hey man, I respect the work that you do. I'm good with you, but they'll be like, hey, F those guys in Motor T, like, yeah, man, F them. Let's let's get back to it. And to things like that, you should tell them like when you're writing something, if you have no knowledge of it, try to figure out or do research by reading a book or contacting somebody that has been in any of those. If you can get somebody that has been in multiple wars or multiple veterans in multiple wars, great, compile that and then you can somewhat make some of that of it. But to try to read a couple books, not talk to anybody, and be like, "Hey, this is the way it's gonna be," like it's not gonna happen. And that you have a lot of fails. One of the I talked about it in one of the clips that I posted not too long ago, um, about big franchise movies. Like there's one that just came out that has to deal with prehistoric animals. And that one, the girl that or the actress that's on there is supposed to portray a female marsoc operator, which at this moment there's no female marsoc operators. But that's set in the future. But the way that she carries herself has nothing to bear that she was actually in the military. The way she carries herself, the way she holds a weapon, the way she says things, like there's nothing that shows that she was in the military. Now, I don't know if who they got to be the advisor or who or what she did as an actress to say, hey, this person would do this thing, this would be their mannerism, this would be that thing, but they didn't. And I think that was one of the biggest fails that you're continuously seeing right now as far as cinema and TV is concerned.
Utter insanity because there's nothing an actor hates more than not knowing what they're doing. The great working on a show, like when I worked on Band of Brothers or the guys on the Pacific or whatever, is we've got you guys basically telling us exactly what to do. It's so much more comforting. It gives you a structure. No, you're not making a tit of yourself. You know, do you know what I mean? Like you just,
Yeah. Oh no, no, no. And you can see that.
yeah,
You can see that. Like I think and John Seda was one of the guys that I trained, and I'm still friends with him
yeah,
up to this day. And the comfort that you guys find sometimes when like, hey, this is the real like cool. And then you get either a writer or a prop guy or somebody within the crew that's just like, hey, no, this is the way you're supposed to do it. You're like, is that the truth? Like, no. Okay. And then you look back like, hey, I'm gonna do what my tech advisor told me to
yeah.
do because he was actually in it. No disrespect to you that you served whatever point that you did, but that's his job. I'm gonna follow his lead.
Yeah, it's classically you just you nod at whoever it is, and then you just look over to the military advisor, and they go, "Don't do it like that." Yeah, no, it's funny. You just remind me of two stories that my dad told me. One from the Falklands, and this is classic military humor where they're ragging on one another. Um, he went into a bombed out building somewhere on one of the battlefields. I forget which it was, Goose Green, something like that, and someone had sprayed two para, so the second parachute battalion, two para, first to land, first to fight. And someone underneath it from a different regiment had written, and first to fucking die, you wankers. It's like, and the other one, and I have told this one before, but you will like. So on the way back from Iraq in '91, he's
Yeah.
and it's a plane troop carrier, so everyone's coming back. And on one side of the plane is a bunch of American dudes coming back, and the other side is a bunch of English guys. And at one point in this long flight back, like an F-16 or an F-18 pulls alongside with its nose up like this, and starts like the pilot starts pumping his hand like this, like, yeah.
Yeah.
These American guys are like, yeah, USA. About an hour later, an F-3 Tornado pulls along a Brit jet with its nose up, and the pilot just goes, "Fuck off, you wankers."
Oh my gosh. Yeah, no. Well, I think even for us, when I was part of the invasion in Iraq in 2003,
Yeah,
and I was part of RCT 5, and that's just a regimental combat team that went through. But we had Marines, and then we had the Brits as well, with communications and coordination as far as things like that. But it was just comprised of different units, and from the First Marine Division, and then the implemented company that we have from the Brits. But like it's funny that you say that because anytime that we were on anywhere, it would just be like, oh yeah, no man, like fuck you, we guys would do it better. But like they were a small unit, but they were always like, regardless of it, trying to go head to head with us on different things. But when it came to other regimental teams or other groups, it's like, hey, fuck off, leave them alone. They're with us. Like you don't fucking pick on them. And like, yeah, man, but they're from another country. Like, fuck it, they're part of our team. You don't fucking say shit.
If you
But it's funny, man.
What's the story? I heard it recently, or I read it recently, of some British Special Forces guys, whether they were SAS or not, I'm not quite sure. And they're in the chow hall on an American base, and some American dude comes in and he sees all these SAS guys, but they've all got a US flag patch on their shoulder. And he's like, "Dude, what's with the flag patch?" And the guy's like, "Well, we've got to blame it on somebody." It's good, isn't it?
Oh no, with that I think they I forgot we had an operation that we had to do when we were there, and they strictly instructed us. They're like, hey, no US flags. If you have anything that has a US flag on your person, make sure you rip that off or don't have it on. We're like, why? Like grandma, like in case something goes south, they don't want nobody to know who it was. We're like, oh, that's bullshit. But it's funny that you say that like we like, yeah, we have to blame it on somebody. But I forgot where it was that they ended up. Oh, one of my buddies from the Marine Corps, when I think they were in Okinawa. They were in Okinawa and they went out to the bars and they got into a fight, and it was a big crazy brawl and everything, and they ended up bringing the patch of another unit and they just tossed it on the ground, like saying like, hey, that's who was here. So the following day the MPs went to go try to see who in the unit was there, and they were just picking up guys from the other unit that they had just a patch. I'm like, dude, you're fucking. I'm like, you guys are fucked up. He's like, yeah, like, dude. He goes, hey, he goes, fuck him. He goes, we had issues with them, so we didn't really care. I was like, ah, dude, but that's what you're saying about the patch. I'm like, it's notorious for happening in the military all the time.
So I've been doing some work as well with another Marine vet, a guy called Andy Biggio. I don't know if you know Andy Biggio.
Okay. Yeah, it sounds familiar. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, wrote a couple of books, The Rifle, Rifle 2. He does a lot of work with veterans, so often taking World War II veterans back to the battlefields and stuff like that. And it's like I don't know what it is about the Marine guys that I've met. They seem to come, well, the ones that come back and integrate well seem to, like myself, become these like polymaths where they just do a lot of different things and seem to use their time really, really well. What is a Marine that does that allows you to do that? I mean, he does loads of different things. I mean, he's a police officer in Boston. He's works with vets. He's a writer. I barely have time to brush my teeth in a day. I do it for
Um, I think I guess I'm just speaking for myself on this part. When I came back from Iraq, I think it only took me like roughly about a month that I was able to take off, because everybody was already asking me like, hey, what are you gonna do? What are you gonna do? Like, what's going on? Are you gonna work? Are you gonna do something? And like at my point at that time, I was like, I've been away for like roughly a year in combat. Can I just take like a few like weeks or days off so I can just like decompress? And for my particular experience, we never really had a set base. We were always just living in the street because we were part of a light armor reconnaissance unit. So we always were out on the street and just lived out of our vehicles. So if we would find a ditch or post up or whatnot, we'd just go to sleep at that moment, unless they gave us another location to go to. And even at that moment, they would say like, hey, because you guys have the guns on the vehicles, go ahead and post up by the gate. So we were never really able to fully decompress because we were always so high. And when I came back, I got I took like that roughly month-ish off. And then from then I'm like, okay, I gotta find a job. I'm like, all right. And I went for the job, and from there it just seemed like it was a spiral thing that I'm like, I just gotta keep going. I gotta keep going. And I tried to get as immersed as possible with as many different things that I had. And at that time my daughter was just turning 5 years old. And I'm like, okay, I got to be a father. I got to be a provider. I got to find a good career. I have to be able to like do something, because if I'm not going back into the Marines, then I have to double down on everything that I'm doing. And from that point on, I just consumed everything that I could. And there's other veterans that I've talked to, and other people that have family members that are veterans. Are like, man, these other people just suffer really hard from PTSD, and they suffer from heavy depression, and like they can't get out. And I'm like, how do you do it? I'm like, I don't. Like I load myself up so many with so many things that I it doesn't give me time to think. But I also at times I've told people I'm like, there's a lot of other guys that I know, like the gentleman that you mentioned earlier. Like, man, I'm like, dude, I'm like, I'm trying to keep up with my stuff, but like some of the stuff that other guys do is like it's just epic. And I think that's a standalone test for I think for us Marines is ever since we joined the Marine Corps, we are told like, hey, this is your MOS. Like, great, that's your job. But when you get to your unit, that might be your job, but you also have that job and that job and that job and that job and that other job because we all have to work together and this needs to get done and we don't have enough personnel, so you figure it out. So we already adapted to taking on multiple jobs just by ourselves. And I know with other units, I remember I ran into other Army units or Navy units and Air Force units like, hey man, like who do you guys have to go ahead and fix that? They're like, oh, that's somebody else that comes in. They're like, okay, well, can you just fix this and you're right there? It's like it's not that hard. They're like, yeah, but that's not my department. That's not my job. I'm like, yeah, I know, but you could do it. Like we do it on our side. You can just do it right there. Like, nah, we'll either wait. And for us, it's never been like that. So for guys to go and climb and do different things and just be cops, be firefighters, and then give to the community, give to their families and things like that. It's a drive that is just instilled within us to just continue pursuing, going and going. And I think a lot of the fuel that we get to continue to do that is just the people around us, whether it's other veterans or it's our family members or it's just the fear of failing. That's for me, that's my biggest thing is like the fear of failing. Like I never, when I was in Iraq, I didn't fear dying. I didn't fear anything else. The only thing I feared is that I was gonna make a mistake that was gonna cost either somebody else's life or mess up the mission and whatever it cost. For me, I didn't care about myself. I wanted to make sure that I didn't want to be the person that failed. I didn't want to be known as that guy. So I think coming out of the military, for us Marines, you don't want to be known as that guy. And some of the guys that do fall through the cracks and do make mistakes that pretty much sends their life into a tailspin. Those are the guys that pretty much lost touch with not only with themselves but with everything around them.
That's very interesting that you say that. I don't know. I'm speculating, but with those guys, is there sometimes the fact that maybe they did fail in one direction or felt like they'd failed in one direction? Now they're just beating themselves up. Now they're back.
Yeah, yeah, and I think and having to take a loss,
Yeah,
uh, having to take a loss, especially from somebody in not only in your team but in your unit, and you know that in some shape or form, it's not that you were held accountable for, but in retrospect, you start looking at different things like, shit, man, I should have stepped right instead of left, or I should have took that turn instead of doing that. And if I would have done that, then that wouldn't happen. And then you start going into this wormhole of like what ifs, what ifs, what ifs. And for us, my wife always gets on my case for this. She's like, oh my God, you're always thinking about everything. I'm like, I have to think about anything and everything all at once because if I am to a point that I don't have a solution or I don't have a plan, even if it's a very shitty plan that I'm like, hey, we're just gonna execute and figure it out. If I at least don't have that, I feel lost and I don't like having not knowing what's gonna happen. And for some guys going through that is just their way for them to be able to pull back and try to gain some type of control over their life, but it never happens because you're always going into those wormholes or what ifs, and you at the same time you have guys on the opposite side of the spectrum that even for me I dealt with, which is that survivor skill, because you go through all this crazy shit and close calls and explosions and shootouts and like crazy shit that you've done, and then you're like, this shit happens in the movies. How am I still alive? Like I know a bunch of guys that barely take a drive, step on a freaking mine, and that's it. They're done. I'm like, but I went through that and much more, and nothing really happened to me. Why am I still here? So you have to deal with that type of stuff. But then like I usually tell people, I'm like, it to be able to serve to live to a portion of survivor skill, it's not that you're not worthy of surviving, is that like everything to some shape or form did what you were supposed to do to make your job like a successful mission. Like
Right.
every person that's in charge of taking their team or taking their unit, their main goal is not how many guys can I get killed? It's like, no, can I get all my guys back and still accomplish my mission? That's the ultimate goal of everybody. And if they say that that's not, then they're not a true leader.
Yeah, you don't want to be in their platoon, basically. Yeah, yeah, that's very interesting. I guess should we should we talk a little bit about you coming back and getting involved in the TV and movie industry, dealing with ethics of humans that are actors? Um, was it through the show that you got into the industry, or
I met Freddie Joe. I would have to say like four or 5 years after I got in the film industry. Because when I first got in, I came back and a friend of mine knew that I was a Marine because he was a Marine too. And he's like, hey man, he goes, they need guys that know how to handle weapons and stuff like that for this show. And for me, I thought I'm like, oh, extra is easy money. Sure, man. I'll go be an extra. And I started out with them, and the show was called in Medicine Woman. I think it was like Medicine Woman. But she was like a Native American that became a doctor or something like that. But we ended up going, and they were shooting here in San Fernando Valley, and I showed up, and from there they gathered all the guys that were playing police officers, and they're like, "Hey," they're like, "Who here's military?" And I raised my hand, and five other guys raised their hand. They're like, "Okay, cool. Like, all right, you guys come over here." And then they started like, "Okay, like, what is your expertise?" And one of the guys like, "Oh, I'm in army." Like, "What'd you do in the army?" Like, "Oh, I was a recruiter." All right, next. "What about you?" He's like, "Oh, I was in the Navy." Like, "What'd you do?" Like, "Oh, I worked in submarines." Now, next. "What about you?" The guy's like, "Oh, I was National Guard." "What'd you do?" He's like, "Mortar T." Like, "No, next." Like, "What about you?" And the other guy's like, "Well," he goes, "I dealt with logistics. I was a language major." Like, "No, that's not gonna work." "What about you?" And they got to my friends like, "Oh, I was Marines." Like, "What were you doing in the Marines?" He goes, "Military police." He goes, "All right, now we're getting somewhere." He goes, "What about you?" I'm like, "The Marines as well." He goes, "What'd you do?" I'm like, Latimer Reconnaissance Unit. I'm like, we pretty much did everything that the SWAT team does and special teams does, like by extractions and going in, gathering intelligence, setting up snipers, perimeters, all that stuff. They're like, perfect. You two guys, like, you guys come over here. We're like, all right. They're like, and my buddy, like he was military police, but his experience, he like I said, he was one of those guys that never deployed, did a lot of training, but never deployed, and was just pretty much sectioned to just rolling in cruisers and watching the gate. They never really did anything other than that, from what he told me. And for me, like all the training that we did guerrilla warfare tactics. We were freaking doing extractions. We were setting up perimeters. We were doing Trojan horse operations in Iraq. We were doing all this crazy stuff. So he would just look at me. He's like, "Hey, dude," he goes, "Can you set this up?" I'm like, "Yeah, man, sure." And I think at that time I was like 23 or 20, yeah, I think that was like around how I old I was. I'm like, "Yeah." It goes, "So we have this hostage situation. We have a bus. How would you write that?" I'm like, "Okay." I'm like, "Well," I'm like, "You would have a sniper on this position on the rooftop and this one that on this opposite side." I'm like, "But you want the uh field of fire to cross, not to shoot each other directly." I'm like, "And you would have your police officers creating a barricade." I'm like, "Because the threat is not on the outside, it's on the inside." And I started just going through all the little things, and they're like, "Okay." I'm like, "Do you like it's there? Is this good?" And they're like, "No, no, no, that's perfect. That's perfect." They're like, "Hey, are you SAG?" I'm like, "What SAG?" And they're like, "Oh," they're like, "Okay, here." And they just gave me a voucher. And my buddy's like, "Dude, take that. That's good." And then they're like, "Are you available tomorrow?" And I was there for like I think the next 5 days. I'm like, "Yeah, yeah, no, I'm available." And they just gave me three vouchers, but there was other people that were coming up to me. They're like, "Man, you're young and you have all this experience. Like, you know that there's jobs in Hollywood that like this is pretty much for." I'm like, "Really?" I'm like, "What I'm doing right now, just telling them what to do." They're like, "Yeah." I'm like, "Oh, that's cool." And I started doing more research, and I reached out to a couple other groups at that time that were still active within the film industry. I'm like, "Hey, just came back from Iraq. I would love to work with you guys. I would love to be part of your team. And they're like, thank you, but no thank you. We're full up. And I'm like, yeah, I know, but I have experience. I literally just came back from Iraq. Like I'm full up. They're like, nah, thank you. And I'm like, crap. I'm like, all right. And I bounced around doing special ability for a while. And I ended up meeting another gentleman named Matt Siglock, badass Marine, was with Marine One for Ronald Reagan campaign. So he was the Marine that would stand up and salute every time President Reagan would come in. And he pretty much ran that whole area. And I was like, and then he ended up creating a military advisor company, but he was a military advisor for the TV show Jag and for NCIS, the very first one. And they introduced me to him. He's like, hey, man, I would love to have you on there. Like, you can come in and be part of the guys. I'm like, all right. Fast forward a couple years later, he ended up getting sick, and started moving around. He's like, hey, oh no, sorry, my point. When we were working on the TV show The Unit, they brought me in, and all these guys were crowning, and they're like, "Oh man, that's Freddie Joe, that's Freddie Joe." And I'm like, "What?" He's like, "Oh, this Marine, like, he worked on Band of Brothers." I'm like, "Okay," and they're like, "Man, like that's bad." I'm like, "Man, fuck that guy." I'm like, "No." I'm like, "I'm not gonna go and try to freaking battles just in case he's a Marine." I'm like, "No, fuck it." And I stayed away from him on purpose. And then the other guys are like, "Man, it's Freddie Joe, Freddie Joe." Like, "Man, that's too badass." And everybody started saying like, hey man, there's a rumor going around that he's gonna be going on the next project that's gonna be the sister portion to Band of Brothers, which is the Pacific. And I'm like, for like just strictly Marines? Because I remember when the Band of Brothers came out and I loved it. I'm like, man, that's bad. I'm like, why can't they make something like that about the Marines? I'm like, I would be all over it. And I ended up getting on another project, and those were like the History Channel. Freddie John Cam Die were the advisors on that, and just setting up the troops, the movement, because there was a lot of reenactment portion of it. And Freddie Joe and me and him at that time got really close because we were working close together a lot. And he's like, "Hey man," he goes, would you like to be, or would you want to go to an interview to meet Captain Die to possibly take part of the Pacific? And I'm like, yeah, hell yeah. I'm like, the Marines are fucking dude. I was born for this. I'm like, I will do that. I'm like, whatever you gotta pay me, I'll go myself. And he's like, no, no, no. And he introduced me to Captain Die formally, and I sat down with Captain Die, had a formal interview, and he's like, hey man, he goes, we would love to have you. I'm like, all right, great. And I did that for a while. And when we took off, did the Pacific, one of the best times of my life, apart from the Marine Corps. And I learned a lot on there as far as how to be a good military advisor, a good tactical advisor, how to look at the film, how to study the script, how to talk to your actors, how to talk to your director. And that's a lot of things that a lot of people that come out from the military be like, I'm going to be a military advisor. That's what I'm going to do. But they have no sense on how to approach crew. They have no sense on how to approach the actors. What the creative process for actors sometimes are, on how they like to be diving into their material, whether it's the script or their mannerisms that they have to do for that particular character, and then trying to talk to the director, the producers on how efficient time can be, what would make a better project as far as from our own personal perspective. But from that moment, we finished uh, the Pacific, and we came back. Freddie Joe, I think, got an offer to go to England, and that's when he moved to England for a bit, and I stayed back, and I was helping Matt Siglock fill in on NCIS, Criminal Minds, and all the other shows, and I got in with that. But I think for that, I still kept in touch with Freddie Joe, and I was helping them with World War Z from across the pond. So I was helping them with that one, just like logistic wise, getting boats and stuff like that to send to the visual effects. But it's a big thing that I fell in, and I felt blessed from going into the Marines to coming out and jumping in, and just that pace of time, how it went from extra to special ability to military advisor to now stunts to not going full circle back again into the military advisor portion. And I think it just deals with more. I was very young at that time when I first started, and nobody likes talking to a young guy telling them what to do, or like, hey, this is how it's supposed to be. So Freddie Joe's 10 years older than I am, but even Freddie Joe was still young compared to some of the other advisors that were working within the industry, and those guys, they were towering, I think, Freddie Joe by like 25-ish to 30 years, give or take, as far as like how older they were from him. But even at that point, I teamed up with Freddie Joe, and I'm like, hey, dude, I'm like, whatever we gotta do, we're the two young guys. I'll go with you wherever we need to go, dude. And it was not only just business, but I think he was with me through a lot of hard times as far as personal wise, and that's one of the things that for me that it's a testament to the brotherhood of the Marine Corps. Regardless, even if you didn't serve together, it's a bond that is very unspoken throughout society for us.
Yeah. What was so great about the Pacific? I mean, you're a greenhorn on the Pacific, so you are the young guy. You must be younger than
Yeah.
half.
Oh yeah, I was the youngest one out of all of them. Me and another Marine called Sean Bunch, because me and Bunch were in Iraq together. We were at the same time at the same location, but didn't know each other. But because he was a forward operator, he was attached to the Brits. So once I came back and I got with Matt Siglot's group, they were also like, hey man, like there's this other guy that just came from combat, like he's a combat veteran, like this guy's a shit, like he knows his stuff. And I'm like, yeah, bullshit. I'm like, I think I'm the only one that I know that I'm the combat veteran around here. Because at that time, there wasn't that many combat veterans. There was just a bunch of guys that had served, nobody that had came back from combat. And the ones that didn't really see a lot of combat, or they weren't really skilled to be going in that. And at that time, I hadn't met Freddie Joe yet. And I started talking to Bunch, and they're like, yeah, man, like where were you at? Where were you at? I'm like, oh, I was by the soccer field. He goes, there's no soccer field. I'm like, right. There was a volleyball field. He goes, hey, dude. He goes, wait a minute. Like, you wear CT5? I'm like, yeah, I wear CT5. He goes, like, oh, like, so I'm like, the Brits? Yes. I'm like, in like Charlie and Tracks and LAB. He's like, oh, crap. He goes, oh, man, all right, cool. You're legit. You're legit then. So from then on, I became friends with him. And he's the one that I gravitated to Great Joe first. And then he's the one that told me, like, hey, dude, like, he's cool, man. He's cool. Just talk to him. And when we started talking more, but from then on, me and him were the ones that got sent to go join the Pacific to be part of the cadre for Captain Dive. But when we got there, like Freddie Joe pretty much instructed us like, hey, try to like thrash these guys as much as possible, but don't break them. They didn't join the Marine Corps. They're just actors here. So they need to learn everything about us, but not partially join the Marine Corps. I'm like, got it. And I'm like, hey man, I'm like, can I get fired if I go too hard? He goes, if that's the case, we'll figure it out at that time. I'm like, hey, good to me. But for me, I think the biggest thing that I had is like I had the eagerness to learn, because this level of tech advising was something that I had never been on. And I was learning from the guy that pretty much trained the majority of the guys on Band of Brothers, which was Freddie Joe. And he was really, you can tell a lot of, once I met Freddie Joe and I went back and rewatched Panther Brothers, I saw a lot of their characteristics and mannerisms that he sometimes uses. And I'm like, oh, I get it. And Cam Dice, well, like Cam Dice, a character within himself. And Cam Die did Private Ryan, did all these other shows. I'm like, fuck, I'm like, if you can't get a better intern job than this, I don't know where the fuck you can go. So for me, I was like, hey man, I'll take it all in. I'm like, what do you want me to do? Like, you want me to come in on a day off? I'll come in on a day off, and just to learn and everything. But I was able actual to learn, hey, this is how you break down the script. This is what actually is needed for the camera. This is where you need to see behind the screen, behind the lens, what's actually relevant, what's not. Know your camera angles, know your camera lenses. Um, how the story's gonna pretty much unwind into each of the actors. So all that stuff for me was a big learning curve, but it was something that I considered that was priceless, because you can't put a price tag on that. And because there's a lot of stuff that I learned from both of those gentlemen, and Lieutenant Stokey, he was Cam Dye's right hand man.
So,
Um, Amazing dude, like that. Like between those guys, like I felt like I was in family, and I felt more comfortable. That for me, like the biggest things that I told him when I joined, and when I joined, when we were over there at the Pacific, I'm like, hey man, I'm like, I love you guys. Thank you guys for having me here. But I'm like, I'm not gonna be that guy that lets the Marine Corps down. And they're like, what? I'm like, I represent the Marine Corps. I know you guys brought me here to do a job to be an advisor. I'm like, but I represent the Marine Corps, and I'll be damned if any of these dudes that are non-rates gonna depict the Marine Corps in a way that I don't see fit, or any of my brothers that has served in the past see fit, or previous generations to be not fit. And all the actors, I can honestly say, were very welcoming to
Yeah,
that,
yeah.
with the exception of maybe two.
Come to sort of thing actors freaking love that type of energy, like that actors thrive on. You can tell
Yeah.
people like John Sader. I interviewed John Sader on this podcast as well, and you could tell he loved all that. Do you know what I mean? He
Oh
loved
yeah.
lighting a fire under his ass that then his character comes out of. I mean, it was such an important character anyway. So
Yeah.
cool.
No, well, he ended up helping me on the second phase one. So there's Ham, the other character Ham that he takes on to train on the later portion of the series. He took part. I'm like, hey, dude, I'm like, you're gonna need to train these actors because Gunny Baslone was in charge of training these guys.
Yeah.
So welcome to the show. I'm like, you're gonna be helping me train these guys, and he was running him ragged. I'm like, dude, I'm like, remember, you're still an actor. These guys are actors too. I'm like, so I get it. You're like, you're going to Barcelona, but he goes, fuck that. He goes, if I went through shit and I had to eat dirt and all that, he goes, they're gonna freaking do it too because this is a Marine Corps and they're gonna represent the Marine Corps and they're representing you and they're representing Gunny and Cam. He goes, I'll be damned if they fall out of my watch. I'm like, hey, dude, I love it. Let's get it more. But yeah.
Brother, you speak about yeah, no, just to circle back to what you were saying about Freddie Joe as well. Um, like for those of you listening as well, it's totally true that a lot of guys' mannerisms in band are stolen straight from Freddie Joe, and the main one is how um, Bill Garnier, so Frank John Hughes and
Oh,
Joe as well. It's the way they hold their Thompson.
yeah.
That's how Freddie Joe holds his Thompson. There's something about it being kind of slung, kind of low. The way you
Yeah.
with it, that is exactly because we did all this training and when we used to do like isolating and sniper and all this stuff and all these like military maneuvers, and we couldn't find Freddie Joe. Well, God knows where he would. Suddenly he would appear with his Thompson slung low, looking cool as fuck, and shoot up. So the people are like, yeah, I want to look like that guy. But he's
No, but it's
yeah, yeah,
but that's what you're saying. It's I know for me, even for being for me as a stunt performer, and when I first started out, like one of the things that we take very into heart in the Marine Corps is if you can't go to the school, somebody's gonna come from the school that went to take the class in school, and they're gonna teach you roughly how to do what it is that we need to do. So you study them. You study how they hold their weapon, where they put their foot, how they move their head, how they move from point A to point B. And I knew that from the Marine Corps. So coming into the stunt industry side of the business, like they're like, hey, you're gonna be doubling that guy. Okay. So I would study how he would walk, how he would talk and move. And I would tell actors that I'm like, hey man, I'm like, at this moment is where you want to soak up as much as possible. I'm like to embed in your character. I'm like, because there's a lot of guys that say that, hey man, I took this class, I took that class, and I went through all this stuff. I'm like, but never saw combat, never really deployed. I'm like, and the way that they're holding their weapons or they're doing specific things, I'm like, it's because you were never shot at. So
yeah, yeah,
you hold your weapon in that sense. So the guys that have been shot at, they hold their weapon at a much different way, or they stand in a different way. And I usually tell them, like, that's what you know. Like, even if you're driving down the street and you see certain police officers stand very nonchalant, those are the guys that have never really been shot at. They've been on the beat a lot, but they've never been shot at. Guys that have been shot at are always having their hand on their piece. Like they'll be talking to you nonchalant like this, but their
yeah,
hand would be right close as possible to that gun. That if anything should ever happen, all it takes is one step back and they're already drawing out. And with the military guys, it's honestly the same thing. And I told them that's one thing that I told them when we were on the Pacific. I'm like, generations have changed. How we hold and maneuver with the weapons have small variation, but holding your weapon in a hostile environment does not change,
yeah, no,
regardless of wherever you're at. And I think that's what I said at the beginning of the podcast, that that girl that was portraying to be a female Marine was not even holding the weapon correctly. I'm like, so how can you say that you're an operator or a special operations unit member without ever being or looking the part? So that
Yeah.
doesn't make sense. And I think that's one of the things that a lot of the actors that we were fortunate enough, and I know for Frejo, because he got to, I'm jealous that he got to partake on both Panther Brothers and that one. And he's the only one that's come out on both series. On IMDb, he's the only one that's been on both series. Like nobody has been on that one. And I think for that one, I'm proud of the work that we did on the Marine Corps and all the guys and all the work that they did and everything. And then I think that's one of the things I usually tell people, because at that time there was another series coming out called Generation Kill.
Yeah. We had the
And Generation Kill mostly dealt with the current war in Iraq.
Mhm.
But everybody that anytime that I would tell them, like, hey, like, I'm like, where were you working? I'm like, oh, I was working on this Marine project. I'm like, we were overseas. They're like, oh, like Generation Kill. I'm like, no, the Pacific. And they really hadn't heard about the Pacific yet. And I'm like, Generation Kill. I'm like, and I started studying and looking at it. I'm like, fuck, I'm like, it's recon. So that recon unit was attached to RCT-5. That was part of our team. So, like, in a sense, those guys were like literally our neighbors. Because I remember when they did a walk and talk, they're like, hey, you guys want to go check out like recon's weapons? I'm like, fuck that. Like, we have the same fucking weapons. Like, no, like we've been running around doing the same shit. Like, oh, and all the other units like tracks and some of the other infantry units, they're like, oh my God, let's go look at their stuff. I'm like, nah, man, fuck it. But in retrospect, also a lot of the guys, some of the guys that were on there that ended up joining into the entertainment industry. One of them's a good friend of mine, Mike Lee, was also with that team. Another guy that I met that was also in the show and became one of the advisors, a guy named Rudy Reyes. He was
Yeah.
there. So like all these Marines, like I laugh when people go like, "Do you know this Marine?" And I'm like, no, I'm like, I'm like, the Marine Corps is pretty big, but I've come into more and more that the names or how destiny goes, we all know each other in one way, shape, or form. So even now, for people tell me they're like, oh, like I know so and so that's a special operator, and they told me that they did, they that. I'm like, okay, I'm like, what's your name? And they'll tell me that. I'm like, yeah, like, let me make a call. I'll call somebody, see if I know if they're legit or not. And most of the time, I know somebody that knows somebody that they know who they are, what they did, and what their expertise is. So I say, tell people, I'm like, don't bullshit about your career. Don't bullshit about what you did, because the telephone lines and the internet is very simple that you can just reach and grab a hold of anybody on how they do stuff and what they do things. And I've met a couple coordinators on other shows that were talking everything up. They're like, yeah, man, I'm this, I'm that. I'm like, what's your name? And they told me, and I was just doing stunts on the show. I wasn't even advising. And they'll tell their name. I'm like, all right. I'm like, what unit were you with? And they tell me your name. I'm like, all right. And I'll start calling out people. I'm like, hey, man, do you know so and so? Like, yeah, like, I'm like, how well do you know him? They're like, man, that motherfucker. I'm like, oh, no shit. I'm like, really? I'm like, okay, cool. I'm like, are you sure? Like, are you hard? And he's like, I was there. I'm like, good to know. Thank you. And I was like, and then they would tell you like, hey man, like, and they would start asking me like, so where'd you serve? I'm like, I served in Iraq, and they're like, who, what unit were you with? I'm like, I was with Puerto Lear Alpha Company. I'm like, we were also part of First LAR. I'm like, during the push. I'm like, so we know a lot of everybody on that side. Like, oh, cool. It's like, no, I don't think I know anybody. I'm like, I think I know somebody that you know. And they're like, who? And I was dropped the name. They're like, oh. Oh yeah. Oh, you know what? Like somebody's calling me. I'll be back, man. And that was it. I would never have contact with them for the rest of the show. They wouldn't even look my way or nothing. And I was like, and other people like, oh my God, they're so badass. I'm like, I hope so. I'm like, I hope they're doing a better job at advising than what they did over there. They're like, what? And I wouldn't tattletale or anything like that. I would just shake my head, and other veterans that were there, like, dude, where'd you hear? I'm like, oh, this guy. He goes, fucking stolen valor, motherfuckers. He goes, they're always doing shit like that. I'm like, it's a small world, man. It's
Yeah, I bumped into it
a-
myself doing tours and things. Yeah, so this is an interesting. You reminded me of something. It's interesting that like it might help you with your military advising. When I was at drama school, we were doing a play, right? And it was one of those bloody awful English period costume plays, Zero talks like this. Anyway, point was, we got a critique on it by this director who came to watch it, and he said something fascinating. He said that the only time he believed it was when the guys were coming on stage to take off all the furniture and change the sets in between, not any of the acting, because when they were doing that, everyone was actually moving in the costumes like they actually would.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because they're like
Yeah.
pushing around and moving their skirts and moving like
Yeah.
normal people move.
Yeah.
As soon as like the play started, they were all like really stiff and looked
Yeah.
terrible. And there's something about that in the military advising as well. Is like guys don't like march about all day long. You know what I mean?
Oh no, I think oh my God. I gotten into conversations with Freddie Joe about that. And like a big ups to you, man, because theater, especially when it's period piece like that, I love watching it. I
Yeah,
love seeing it. I love the performance because I'm like, man, to be able to, because there's one thing of spitting out the dialogue, but then there's another thing of saying the dialogue but understanding what
yeah,
you're saying and how you're saying it, that you're supposed to deliver it, which is one of the things that we were in charge as well on the Pacific,
right.
and that was teaching the guys how to speak in 1942 military jargon, whether it was Marines, Army, didn't matter. Like there was different little things that they would say, like a cigarette or a light or a lighter or different things like that. I'm like, it's not a common term. I'm like, they would have different terms and they would come in and out, that they started figuring out more that like, okay, this is the way I need to speak. That even when they were out in town, they would say that. I'm like, you don't have to be full into it, but yes, that's good commitment that you that you did that. But they would always say, like Captain Dodd would be like, man, he goes, I don't want to see just guys marching back and forth. Like, give them a purpose. Like, got it. And if there was a vehicle or there was something to be moved, I'm like, hey, you guys are moving this because your sergeant is on your ass, and we need to hit this deadline. And these guys are coming, and they don't want to look like a slop. I'm like, think of that when you're moving these boxes and moving them from over there. I'm like, because if not, I'm gonna come chew your ass afterwards. And they're like, got it. And they would move, even if it was the background, they would be moving that. The guys in the foreground would be doing roughly the same thing, and the actors would be doing their thing. And that's one thing that I commend a lot of the actors as well. Is like, hey man, it goes, I'm like, if the camera's tight on you, be very subtle with your movements because
Yeah,
they're really tight on you. If they're wide on you, don't be so subtle. Actually go through whatever the paces might be. I'm like, but take that into consideration. And a lot of them suck that up, that even from when I learned that back then to coming into years down the line to the other shows that I worked on and projects, I would always tell people, I'm like, hey, I'm like, not everybody's marching around. Not everybody's doing like, yes, sir. Or one of the latest ones I heard, I forgot what show it was. It was a short movie, and the guy that's supposed to be a drill instructor or a drill sergeant is like, "Hey, maggot!" I'm like, "Oh, that runs and freaking irks me every time I hear." I'm like, nobody in the Marine Corps, let alone the Army or any other ones, in the last 60 years have said maggots when they're talking to their troops. Nobody says maggots. Like that's something from like the 40s or the 50s because they would think of you as something like lower than life form because like you're not even in the like above the dirt, you're underneath the dirt. Like you're not, like that was an insult to them back then because farming town stuff like that, they incorporated, they understood that. Fast forward to now, you tell somebody maggot, they're like, yeah, sure, whatever. What does that mean? Like it doesn't make sense, especially in a futuristic format. Like it does not make sense. So I usually try to tell people, I'm like, hey, am I how you're speaking or what you're going to say? Make sure you know what you're saying, or what is the purpose of the context that you're saying it. I'm like, if you're going to offer an insult, so if you want to actually insult somebody that's a military member, just call them a non-rate. And they're like, a non-rate? Like, you're a non-rate. You don't even rate a salute. You don't rate respect. You don't rate anything. Get off my site. And they're like, huh? I'm like, yeah, you want to insult them? Like, yeah, get out of here, you non-rate. Like, and especially for operators and guys that work in the special operations field or that area, that's one of the common things that they use. Like, you're non-rate. You're like, get out of here. You don't have clearance. You're beneath us. Go away somewhere. And I think they usually tell people, I'm like, that's the nomenclature that they usually do, or how they're rearranging their gear. One of the biggest things that also irks me is you'll have guys um when they're getting ready to do a raid or they're moving into something and they're right at the car and they go and they charge their actual weapon. I'm like, why would you do that outside the door that you're about to come in? Nobody does that. You do that in the back, away from anybody, because you're trying to create sound discipline. That's a whole element of surprise. You're giving the whole element of surprise away because you're trying to look cool, and it's not cool. It's actually more than anything very mind challenging that you're doing that, and the things like that that I'm like, ugh. But yeah, I know what you mean when the guys are like, "Oh, you guys rearranging," that's the only thing that the guy
Yeah,
is like is very distracting. I'm like, to a sense, yes, and to a sense, no. But yeah,
my dad's one, not a non-rate. My dad used to call people a waste of rations. That was oh, to everybody. Was he was
that's a good one.
you're
That's a good one.
right, that you may have that. Well, listen, but I had you for about an hour. It's been fantastic. I was only
Oh
going to
man, thank you guys for having me. I appreciate you guys, and I love you guys, and for letting me come in and just take you guys' time up.
oh well, fantastic. Well, thanks so much. And I'll say muchas gracias and buena suerte and all the rest of the stuff. And it's been really, really cool.
Likewise, man, and you guys always have a home here if you guys stop by again.
Love
But
to.
I'll be looking for you guys in the future, so in person, most likely.
Yeah, yeah. Please don't come after me. Okay.
No, 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 no.
All right. Cheers, mate.
Thank you guys. I appreciate you, and like I look forward to seeing you guys again in person, like I said, and hopefully Frejo will jump in on that one.
Brilliant. Yeah, we'll have you both on. It'd be great.
So thank
But
you guys.
cheers, man.
My best. All right.
Bye.
Um,
All right. That was Roberto Garcia. It was fantastic, actually. It was really fun chatting to him. I am going to try and get him and Freddie Joe on because a whole bunch of ideas popped into my head while he was talking, but I would quite like both perspectives. Yeah, what a fun guy. Brilliant. All right, well, I'll round it out here. I'll say thank you very much for listening. I'll say thank you very much to our Patreons for their continued support, and we will catch you again next time. Thanks very much. Cheers.